This accident occurred on one of the largest European cruise ships. The disaster occurred in the Tyrrhenian Sea, near the Italian island of Isola del Giglio, and posed a threat of pollution to the Mediterranean waters. The evacuation of passengers and crew members from the board lasted throughout the night. However, not everyone was saved. The tragedy of the Costa Concordia. The Costa Concordia passenger liner belonged to the class of one of the largest cruise ships. 13 decks house 1508 cabins, a fitness center with swimming pools, jacuzzi and saunas. There were also all possible types of entertainment on board, from cinemas and water parks to restaurants and internet cafes. The vessel reached 297 meters in length and 35.5 in width. Since 2006, Costa Concordia has successfully carried out cruise voyages. However, 2 years later, the first accident occurred. At the entrance to the harbor of Palermo, as a result of strong gusts of wind, the ship ran into port fortifications and suffered minor damage. The incident was not publicized, so as of 2012, nothing felt like a tragedy. The ship was quite new, and the passengers had no reason to worry. Costa Concordia went on its last journey on January 13, 2012. There were 4,229 people on board. More than 1,000 of them were crew members and service workers. Among the passengers were citizens of 62 countries. In addition, among all the others on board was Valentina Capuanu, whose personal experiences were touched by the disaster. She claims her grandmother survived the Titanic, and now she faces a similar disaster. The command of the vessel was entrusted to the permanent captain from this liner, Francesco Schettino, and the crew was represented by citizens of Italy, Indonesia, and the Philippines. The weather was perfect for going out to sea, with clear skies and a light wind. After walking 55 kilometers of its journey, Costa Concordia was not far from the island of Giglio. The usual route of the liner ran between it and Cape Monte Argentario, at a distance of 11 kilometers from the island. That day, the captain changed his travel plan. Assuring the crew of his familiarity with the waters, he ordered the approach to the island to signal the vacationers. Such entertainment allegedly took place regularly during this cruise and always delighted passengers. Therefore, Schettino decided to go off course and reduce the distance from the shoals along the coast to 920 meters. There was no detailed map on board showing shoals and reefs, as Giglio was not part of the travel plan. Despite this, the helmsman did not dare to contradict the captain and obeyed the order. The clock at that time was 9:34 p.m. Wanting to impress the travelers, the captain gave orders one by one, as a result of which the Costa Concordia was close to the nearby reefs. Only 10 minutes had passed from his first erroneous order, when he noticed a rock at a distance of 150 meters directly on the course, which was barely visible from the water. Schettino immediately commanded the right on board, thus trying to avoid a collision. Then one of the team members informed him that the port side was touching the bottom. And a second later, the inevitable happened. Costa Concordia, at a speed of 30 kilometers per hour, hit a block of Lascaux Reef on the port side. A 53-meter crack formed in the liner. Water gushed into the ship. It was in this part of the ship that all the important mechanisms were located: pumping station and compressor for air conditioning, traction electric motors, transformers, main diesel engines, etc. The rapid flooding cut off the power to the entire liner in a minute. At the time of the collision, most of the passengers were in restaurants and cafes for dinner. Some spent time with their family in their cabins. During the impact, the Costa Concordia trembled with a roar. Some of the passengers could not stay on their feet. Loose furniture and things scattered all over the place. Several dozen injured people turned to the medical staff in a short time after that. Some passengers began to have panic attacks. People rushed to get life jackets. At that time, the captain did not yet realize the full scale of the disaster. He informed the Coast Guard of the blackout but didn't request help. The crew informed the passengers on the speakerphone that there were problems with the generator, urged them to remain calm and stay in their cabins, ensuring the problem would be solved soon. Despite this, passengers already felt a slight roll of the ship to the left side. Not believing the statements, they contacted the Coast Guard and police themselves. 40 minutes post-collision, team members inspected the damaged compartments and reported Costa Concordia wouldn't stay afloat for long. They managed to restart 3 diesel generators, which in turn could not cope with the load. The ship's steering jammed, rendering the liner uncontrollable, and it began to drift slowly. Over time, the pumps stopped completely, so the ship began to sink even faster. In the end, the crew submitted a request for help to the control center and asked to send 2 tugs. At 10:33 p.m., an alarm sounded on board. After that, the captain informed the passengers about the need to gather near the lifeboats using a speakerphone. Rescue boats, a ferry, and a helicopter all went to the Costa Concordia. After 15 minutes of preparation, the boats were ready to be launched. Passenger boarding was chaotic and disorganized. Passengers rushed to save themselves in front of each other, refused to let children pass without waiting in line. The real hero of this tragedy was drummer Giuseppe Girolamo. He gave his boat seat to 2 children that evening, and divers found his body days later. Some people threw themselves into the water in panic and tried to save themselves by swimming on their own. 3 of them never reached the shore. About half an hour after the evacuation began, Schettino changed from his captain's uniform and ordered the rest of the crew to descend into the boat deck. After another 15 minutes, he was spotted in one of the boats. About 300 passengers still remained on board the ship. Schettino broke the shipping code rule, which demands the captain to leave only after all passengers are evacuated in an emergency. Schettino later claimed he accidentally slipped on the deck, leading him to the boat. The fact that the captain had left the ship was soon learned by the head of the Coast Guard, De Falco. He immediately contacted him and ordered him to return to Costa Concordia in order to coordinate the rescue operation. However, Schettino didn't return on board. When lifeboats couldn't be launched, people used ropes to descend independently to the water. The rest of the people were filmed with the help of helicopters. At about 5 o'clock in the morning, the rescue operation was reclassified as a search operation. Divers continued searching for the dead and missing. Over the next few days, they managed to find several more living people who, for various reasons, were blocked in the ship's premises. The search for the dead ended on January 31st. The victims of the Costa Concordia disaster were 32 people. Authorities banned navigation within 1 nautical mile of the sinking site. The Costa Concordia tanks stored 2,380 tons of fuel. To prevent an environmental catastrophe and protect the unique Mediterranean flora and fauna of this water area, boom barriers were deployed around the ship. Pumping hazardous substances here continued until March's end. The investigation into the disaster was carried out by the Italian Central Commission for the Investigation of the Maritime Accident and the Italian Coast Guard Port Authority. The prosecution suggested a 2,697-year prison sentence for the vessel's captain in court. 15 years were supposed for causing death by negligence, 10 years for sinking the liner, 8 years for each of the more than 300 passengers he left to die on board, and the same number for everyone who did not wait for rescuers. Schettino partially denied guilt, blaming the accident on an unmarked reef. In total, the court found 6 people guilty. The head of the crisis center was sentenced to 2 years and 10 months in custody. Due to the disorganized evacuation, the chief passenger administrator was also sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. 3 navigators received terms from 20 to 23 months, which were later reclassified as conditional. The longest investigation was conducted against Francesco Schettino. Finally, on February 12, 2015, he was found guilty and imprisoned for 16 years. The investigation concluded the disaster had several causes. First of all, deviations from the safe route. The language barrier caused the helmsman to not always timely and correctly respond to the captain's orders. The third reason was unauthorized persons on the control bridge, admitted and invited by the captain. After clarifying the causes, leading international passenger shipping associations introduced a number of new rules. Amendments were also made to the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea. The Costa Concordia was only recovered from the seabed and towed for disposal in 2014. More than $1 billion were spent on this operation.